Watch people are a bit weird. That's not up for debate. It's fact, and you know it. But there are some things we do that even we think are too weird for public consumption. Well, I'm here to reassure you that you're not alone. Here are those strange behaviours we all exhibit, but we're too ashamed to talk about. The last one, wow. You won't believe how much it bookends this list. I'll start off with an admission that's actually pretty shameful. I'm not entirely sure I'm capable of reading the time. Not from an analog watch anyway. We keep hearing stuff in the news about how the youngest generations aren't being equipped with core traditional skills like writing and telling the time, and how technology is making those abilities obsolete in place of more useful stuff like dabbing and eating Tide Pods. But I've got no excuse. I grew up in the pre-email era when emails were just called mails. That doesn't sound right. When logging onto the internet required a mandatory performance of some 8-bit Skrillex, and when learning to read the time required an understanding of the Bezel method. And yet, whenever I go abroad, I always set the time wrong. 98.4% of the time, it's a trip to Switzerland too, so I should be pretty well practiced at it by now. But for whatever reason, I keep doing it wrong and ending up an hour or so out. And I thought it was just me until Charlotte came with me on a trip and I noticed her watch was wrong too. I told her she'd not set it and she said she had and must have got it wrong. Again. It was then I realised I was not alone. And neither are you. When I take a shower, I take my watch off. Not because I'm scared 100 meters of water resistance isn't enough, or at least not just because I'm scared 100 meters of water resistance isn't enough, but because I don't want that little ring of skin underneath it becoming its own habitat. I use an especially scratchy scrubber that Charlotte, who apparently feels nothing and not just emotionally, introduced me to, and every morning I emerge from the shower pink and raw, like a freshly peeled snake. Yet still, despite all my attempts to prevent otherwise, my watch still accumulates wrist custard. Now, there are degrees to these things. I've seen watches so loaded with Parma ham you couldn't get them into Australia, but I imagined their owners had the same kind of relationship with water as a rabies victim. Mine aren't that bad, but they do get a bit of a film, and it grosses me out. One thing I've noticed when I wear a watch is a sort of subconscious handler type behaviour I exhibit around my left arm, and in particular the wrist. You know how presidents have minders that keep the great unwashed from touching them and, in theory at least, stop them getting shot? Well, I'm kind of like that, but instead of for an entire person, I'm just looking out for a single limb. Without even thinking about it, when I approach a narrowing or am forced to move close to a rough brick wall, or worse, am reaching for something in a confined space, the training kicks in and I bring my arm up to my chest or tuck it in behind me, or sometimes I even access full lockdown sleeve protection mode. With the precision of a pro operation player, I can thread that wrist through impending danger unscathed, knowing full well I'll get more than a flashing light and a buzzing sound if it all goes wrong. And as I'm a true professional, no one around me is ever the wiser. In my role as minder, I am unseen and all-knowing, always 2 steps ahead and willing, if it came to it, to put my body on the line for that watch, up to and including a minor graze. There's big talk in the auto world about that new car smell, a privilege only for those wealthy enough to afford crippling depreciation, and it's a phenomenon universal across that industry. A combination of leather and the smug satisfaction of choosing your own options, the smell triggers one of 2 responses depending on your upbringing. Either a dopamine hit of the anticipation of getting something new, or the anxiety of being somewhere you don't belong. Whilst not as ubiquitous, the same thing exists with watches. I'm talking specifically about the Rolex box smell, a delicious concoction of plastic and fire retardant that is unmistakable amongst its peers. That's right, we have the ability to identify a Rolex box purely by smell. The insistence of Rolex, modern Rolex at least, of not using anything but plastic in pretty much all its boxes, gives it that distinct, unmistakable aroma, one that has become synonymous with not just that new watch feeling, but also the shame of what it took to get there. There's not another brand whose boxes can quite match the same sensory experience. A Jaeger LeCoultre box, for example, in wood and leather, smells more like lanolin and irrelevance. The nervous tick. We all have them, some more obvious than others. Whether it's a twitch, a cough, or the invasion of Ukraine, we each express our weaknesses and insecurities in ways that would get Tim Roth frothing. When it comes to watch anxiety, we're no different. Whether we're anxious about the watch itself, what it says about us in an unfamiliar environment, or even just using it as a crutch to support us in times of general unease. For watch people, it becomes part of that nervous routine. For me, it's the crystal wipe. Whether with a tie, the inside of a t-shirt, or in times of desperation, a bare thumb, whether it needs it or not, the ritualistic crystal wipe will precede just about any activity I'm unsure about. It's like the Men in Black neuralizer, except I don't get to meet Will Smith. Once that crystal is crystal clear, so is my mind. The next quirk may be triggered in the same way, but given the satisfactory sensation of clicking a particularly good bezel, I'd be inclined to consider Bezel Exercise more part of a watch's regular workout routine than some sort of self-healing. It's a moving part, and since Darwin blessed us with the opposable thumbs required to use it, we do, and not just for the satisfaction of feeling that ratchet jump from tooth to tooth like an overzealous dentist. It's a maintenance check, like giving the brakes a firm press to make sure they're doing what I want them to. The fact that Charlotte was taking a drink just at that moment in the passenger seat is pure coincidence. No one likes a sticky ring, so keeping the bezel moving is not only a reassurance of its correct operation, but also a preventative measure to keep it so. But don't do it too much. As my doctor keeps reminding me, it'll get loose if I keep playing with it. When a person has need to put their watch down, perhaps if it's especially warm and preventing them from typing comfortably, or at the end of the day when it's time to lie painfully awake for at least 6 of the next 8 hours, they, well, put it down. But that's people. We're not people. We're watch enthusiasts, and that's much worse. For us, putting a watch down is more of a ritual, a moment of both reflection and consternation. It's a chance to absorb what a fine miniature machine it truly is, but also to worry about just how much the smooth wood surface is going to destroy the glassy mirror finish. The average person doesn't need to be a world champion at rock, paper, scissors, metal, wood to know that wood gets beaten by metal like it owes it money. Yet for some reason we lay that watch down so gently it's got our jealous newborns calling the CPS. It's just wood, and it's probably not even wood, it's plastic that looks like wood, and the watch is as likely to get scratched as a dog shit covered lottery card. Can never be too careful though. The invention of the aqualung and the subsequent art of hiding underwater instigated a race to create the most water-resistant wristwatch, such that divers didn't hide underwater too long, i.e. forever. The principle is pretty simple. Any point of ingress in the watch needs to be sealed with a seal, and where possible with a compression fit aided with the security of a screw thread. This helter-skelter for ants was first invented way back in 400 BC by Archita of Tarentum for squashing olives and letting the juice loose, and many centuries later it continues to be used for making sure juice doesn't try to come back in again. Sea juice, I mean. One such usage in a dive watch is the crown, which allows the user to access the most vulnerable part of the watch and return it to full sea juice proofness once finished. That is, if they remember. Which is why watch types wearing dive watches have developed a habit for giving their screw-down crown a little tweak before doing anything remotely juicy. It is possible to over-tighten a screw-down crown and cause premature wear to the seal, so the tweak is one mastered with a sympathetic touch, a level of dexterity trained through years of pulling out that one long eyebrow hair. It's like having a fleshy, sausage-like torque wrench to make sure you're meeting spec. Doesn't matter if you're washing your hands or looking for Jack Dawson, the screw-down crown test is an important ritual that can't be forgotten. The mattress companies say you should change your mattress every 10 years. The underwear companies say you should change your underwear every day. And the dentists say you should change your toothbrush every 3 months. Pah! 3 greedy industries vying for your money. But it's not all bad. When your toothbrush comes to the end of its toothbrushing life, its true calling becomes apparent. Remember the aforementioned arm gravy. A soft bristled toothbrush is the perfect agitator to separate it from your beloved. As my dear old nanny used to say, stiff enough to lift, smooth enough to groove, God rest her. And so once your toothbrush's commitment to the mundane task of keeping your teeth white and pearly is complete, it can ascend to greatness. You'll say, don't throw that out, that's my watch toothbrush, to a bemused partner, or even just to yourself so you don't feel so alone. From there on in, that brush is sacred, able to reach all the right places and leave you feeling satisfied. And then, one day, it'll become too soft, too splayed, and it'll go to its final resting place as the brush you use to clean the crud that builds up around the plug hole. A watch isn't a whole lot of use on the floor, and that's why watch manufacturers have developed high-performance clasps to make sure nothing comes between you and your timekeeper. Some of the biggest improvements we've seen come from the house of Rolex, who, while still using the same principle of the flip-lock clasp, have upgraded the original construction from pressed peanut sweepings to actual metal. With ceramic bearings, micro-adjust and a milled steel chassis, the modern Rolex clasp is as likely to let go as a neurotic girlfriend. And yet despite that, we watch owners still have trust issues. We all remember that one time we didn't secure the clasp just right and the watch fell, if even just a few inches, and our butts puckered like a fish out of water. So it's another matter of ritual to check the clasp, and not just with the half-hearted pat down of a minimum wage fairground operator, but by completely undoing it and securing it again fresh. But did I do it right this time? Ladies check out each other's shoes and handbags. Men check out each other's watches. Taking sage advice from Jerry Seinfeld, scoping out someone's watch is like looking at the sun. Glance, don't stare. And we've perfected that art as collectors to a degree of finesse where we can not only tell what make a watch is, but also the model and age, and even if it's got box and papers, just from a quick peek. It's the ocular assessment, a Terminator-style readout of information that will determine if and how you'll engage with this individual in conversation. It's almost impossible not to do, but I can't stress this enough. Don't fall for the rookie mistake and linger too long. At best you'll get ignored, and at worst you'll be eating fists for eaters. My eyes are up here. Let me paint a picture for you. A Rolex Submariner, box fresh and gleaming in the sun, captured in a shot that reveals the depths of the black dial in all its oily gloss, suspended between two bands of brushed steel, laid out on top of a rock so rough it could make you seasick. Did you cringe? Did you physically recoil at the thought of that immaculate finish being clawed at by the rock's craggy edges? You've experienced that reflex on behalf of your wallet, and also on behalf of the many years of service that watch still has yet to do. I think we all agree that watches should be worn and enjoyed, and that's going to inscribe a unique history in the metal that can't be avoided. But to accelerate that process for the sake of the gram, I'd rather slam my gentleman's goujons in a car door. Okay, so this one's only going to be relatable to the downier types, and to be clear, that means those of you covered in hair. Why the hair from my head insists on migrating down my shoulders and onto my arms, I don't know. But regardless, it's very much made its home right around the place where I tend to keep my watch. There aren't many sights more grotesque than a hair-framed watch doing its best impression of a meth-addicted Simba, and I've been to Slough. Rally straps with the big holes in them. No good. It's like an arm hair arboretum. Ultra-thin watches. They look like they're being reclaimed by nature. Even with watches on straps that aren't integrated, you have to be careful, just in case that gap gives the watch a goatee. There are means and ways to mitigate this problem. It's called the hair tuck, a watch-wearing procedure that starts from the moment it gets put on. Instead of laying the watch down at its final destination, which lifts the upstream hair into a little horological comb-over, it is placed an inch or so further up and slid down into position, trapping most of the errant flyaways under the case and bracelet. It's that, or a stubbly shave, if you like the German women's shot put look. Buying a new winter jacket is a moment of great reflection. The previous jacket, a warm, comforting, familiar home, is parted ways with. The new, inevitably slightly larger one, eyed with caution. It has, after all, big sleeves to fill. Anyway, like a magnificent stag shedding its antlers, It takes time to grow into that new jacket, but not before we've given it one very important test. A lot of modern winter jackets can be a bit too clever for their own good, with more flaps and folds than an origami Sharpie, and so you can never be too careful with the sleeves in particular. The jacket might, for reasons to this day remain unclear, be reversible, and that could mean the bare naked steel of an exposed popper is waiting in the darkness to inflict harm upon your watch. Before trying on a new coat, it's always a good idea to send a reconnaissance fist up that sleeve first. So the thing with a mechanical watch with a quick set date is that it's actually surprisingly easy to break. On many, the date change starts engaging a few hours before midnight and doesn't fully release until a few hours after, with that amount varying per brand and the age of the model. A modern Rolex with an instantaneous date can be quick set whenever, for example, but many other manufacturers advise staying out of a particular window either side of midnight, like their little horological gremlins. And there are more different windows to avoid than a teenager's laptop. For some movements, it's 9 PM to half past midnight. Others are 10 PM to 2 AM. It's impossible to remember every combination, and so it's just generally easier to make sure a watch is set somewhere between 6 AM and 6 PM before using the quick set date. But that would be boring. And for some reason, despite every other precaution taken to protect the watch, when it comes to the quick set date, we like to play a bit of chicken with it. 9 PM, maybe even 10 PM on the nose. There, I've literally saved myself seconds. We've already spoken about the inevitable accumulation of wear and tear, and we're all well aware of how futile it is to try and avoid. But do we really need to go so far in the other direction and routinely inspect our watches to mentally catalogue every single mark? Unfortunately, having the attention to detail of a Formula One scrutineer and the curiosity of a Pulitzer Prize-winning cat, we punish ourselves by taking stock of the damage we've done on a microscopic scale, to what is essentially a very scratchable item brought forth into an incredibly scratchy world. It is a futile spiral with only one destination: misery. We could just ignore it and get on with our day, but then how else will we mentally atone ourselves for the moment we choose to sell it and have to explain to our partners why it's not worth as much as we said? In lieu of being genetically blessed with anything worthwhile checking out in a mirror, the alternative is to simply catch a glance of your watch instead. It can be at home, but that's usually deliberate. The best moments are the organic ones, when your subconscious sends a pop-up alert for a hot single watch in your area, only to realise it's your own reflection in a shop window. It's a view you don't often get to see, but it's the view everyone else gets all the time, so it's kind of like an out-of-body experience, only with less culturally appropriating white women. These horological projections last just a few moments before the illusion is shattered, by which I mean your partner's wandered off. If you're going out somewhere nice and you put your best watch on, of course playing in the back of your mind is the concern that today might be the day you donate it to a kind stranger who trades it for a free ride in an ambulance. So when you get to where you're going, before the jacket comes off, you've got to scope the place out. Let's be honest, you've got no idea what it is you're looking for exactly. Thus far, I've not been to any restaurant serving two men in balaclavas making unbroken eye contact with me. But nevertheless, it feels almost reckless to generally not check out your surroundings just a little bit. And if the worst does happen, it'll probably be the last person you expect anyway. You'll get snitched on to two kids dressed in a long coat by the pub dog, who's trained to recognise 8-sided objects. You know you've got a watch that really hits the spot when it seems to command some strange power of hypnosis over you. A Casio is a fantastic bit of kit, and when you look at it you most definitely come away knowing the time. But that's not the only reason we buy wristwatches. The ones that have carved a special place in the watch box are the ones that bring out your inner Clint Eastwood. Do I feel lucky, Clint Eastwood, not get off my lawn, Clint Eastwood? When a routine time-telling becomes a 50-yard stare. When the dial catches the light just right, it's like the icy gaze of the demon headmaster. Never mind telling the time, you just quite simply can't look away. Days can pass, your beard can grow long, civilizations can come and go, Tool might release another album, but you won't be released from that dial until it's ready. But by far and away the biggest quirk of being a watch buyer is an insane level of desensitization. Not as a coping mechanism for those awful, awful things your AD made you do.
It puts the super ocean on its skin, or else it gets Hublots again.
But quite simply the price. Pre-watch buying, a $10 beer would have elicited a quick breath of air drawn between the teeth. No way was it worth the extra $16 to make the hotel on the edge of a cliff in the middle of a war zone refundable. Now though, a $3,000 dive watch can seem like great value for money. It's not like we're not aware of it either. There's an element of frog in a hot pan syndrome, sure, but then that frog doesn't have to go round to a friend's house and hear how they splashed out $500 on a Gucci quartz. Oh, we know what we're doing, but we've just learnt to justify it in other ways. All of a sudden, we're like a Gordon Gekko Wall Street expert conjuring phrases like asset class and investment potential to our unconvinced partners. Maybe she'll be impressed with the font on my new business cards instead. You might, in a completely desperate slip of reason thinking, even try to accumulate the total cost of their throwaway fashion by comparison. I advise you don't, as you'll soon realise it barely scratches the surface of just your watch's depreciation. It would be like ExxonMobil lecturing Arquita of Tarentum on the impact of oil production. So why do we do it to ourselves? Why do we do any of this to ourselves? Well, that's between us and the universe. It could be worse. It could be a heroin addiction. Although, in hindsight, that might be cheaper. See you next time.